Welcome back to Talk of the Town on WHTC, Holland's Cool FM, on WHTC.com, and on the WHTC app for your smartphone. Once again, here's your host, Gary Stevens.
Welcome back to Talk of the Town for this Monday, August 17th. It is the third Monday of the month, which means at this time we talk with one of the members of the Lakeshore's state legislative delegation. He is second-term Republican senator, the minority leader in the Senate from the 20th District. He is Aric Nesbitt of Lawton, who represents much of Allegan County in the Senate, and he joins us over the phone this morning. Aric, good morning, and hope all is well.
Hey, good morning, Gary. Thanks for having me on, and hope everybody's had a good, safe weekend, and looking forward to another beautiful week here in West Michigan.
It certainly is a good, sunny start for those who may not be in our main listening area, and we're just telling you a nice, bright, sunny day, not only along the lake shore, but across much of the state. All right, let me first bring up the fact that is it a little bit more relaxing over the last few weeks since you had to step down from the gubernatorial race? You're throwing your support behind John James, but maybe not as hectic of a pace as it was from, say, January of 2025 until last month?
Yeah, we had met a lot of good people. There's a lot of good, hardworking people across the state of Michigan, and appreciated the support we had around the state. But after President Trump endorsed Congressman James, we knew the primary was over. We needed to unify the ticket, and that's what we did. And I'm blessed to have a wonderful family, a supportive wife that was there when I left the house at 5:30 in the morning and got home at 11 at night, and sometimes a few nights in a row on the road, especially as I'm the only one that visited all 83 counties, and that was a real blessing to meet people in all 83 counties around the state. A lot of good, hardworking people. But, yeah, I've been able to spend a lot more time with the family. Actually, I took the kids to a few parades instead of walking in them. We watched a few, but we're not ending. We're just beginning to make sure that we have a Republican majority in the House and in the Senate, and we elect John James as the next governor, and Mike Rogers in the U.S. Senate, and Doug Lloyd and Tony Forlini for Attorney General and Secretary of State. But it's the last few weeks have been nice. Spending a little more time with the family and catching up with them. Margot's a year and a half, and William's 4, and Catherine's 7 years old, and heck, Catherine's starting second grade next Monday. I can't believe it's already coming to that.
Yeah, it is that time to get the kids back to, well, for one, back to school, and the other one's moving along. All right, let's talk about some of the things going on.
Well, Gary, there was somebody that told me early on that the days are long, but the years are fast. And boy, that's nothing truer when they get you up at 6 in the morning on a Saturday, but they won't wake up by 7 on weekdays. In the blink of the eye, it's all of a sudden, Catherine's going into second grade. It's just amazing.
Speaking from my own past experience, it's only a couple of days until the eldest starts going into maybe college, or it just seems like it'll just fly by over the next few years. So I'm just getting you ready, Aric. Just getting you ready for that. Let's talk about some of the things going on in Lansing right now. It is, for the most part, in district time for many of the lawmakers, the time between the end of June and basically Labor Day. So you've gone a little bit through the district. You've had a chance to speak to some of the constituents. What are they telling you? What they'd like for you to do once you get back into Lansing in September through the end of the year?
People are being squeezed by property taxes, Gary. I mean, it's just the last few years, they're feeling the crush. The incessant increases on property taxes, I just hear it no matter where I go, both in Allegan and Van Buren and Berrien and Kent, but also around the state, that people are really feeling squeezed. And this is something where we can do something about it. I introduced legislation earlier this year to eliminate the state property tax, which would really cut back the individual taxes by, property taxes by about 20% for an average household homeowner. And then also work to eliminate the personal property tax for families, get relief by about $1 billion on energy. And eliminate the real estate transfer tax, which would really work to make sure that we continue to work to lower the cost of housing. But people are just feeling squeezed, whether it's seniors, whether it's working families. It's really putting a squeeze on folks, we got to make housing more attainable and affordable. And that really starts by making sure government's held accountable and we can lower the cost of property tax. That's how you make sure that our families and seniors can make it here in Michigan. But I'm also hearing insurance costs are through the roof. And auto insurance, homeowners insurance. And as you peel back the onion, as you look at what's driving those rates, a lot of it's from decisions that the state Supreme Court's made over the last few years that have really driven up the cost of insurance by handing out big payments to trial lawyers around the state. These trial lawyers are already millionaires. Bernstein's don't need a ton more money, but I tell you one thing, working families can keep a bit more of their money. And so that's why I'd like to see some action to repeal auto no fault here in the state to lower the cost of insurance. We have the highest cost in the Midwest. And as we go back to school, this is a shame. We're a bottom 5 state in education. We got to make sure that we bring back phonics-based reading for our students, especially at the early ages, bring back the trades for high school students, and make sure that our students are career ready or college ready. And right now, the accountability on the schools and equipping the teachers just isn't happening. You look at the last 10 years, and you've seen the number of students in Michigan decline, number of teachers decline, the number of administrators and staff increase. I think we got to make sure the resources go to the teachers in the classroom, make sure that the students are learning phonics, making sure that they're prepared for school. And as I talk to folks around West Michigan, that's a really big concern, making sure that our kids can make it in Michigan again.
A couple of things I want to point out by the points that you made up. First of all, about the property tax cuts that you are proposing. One, does the state property tax, will that really give a lot of relief in the overall property tax question? Because wouldn't most property tax be based on local assessments than the state assessment?
It depends on your house and what's there, and where you live. If you live in a typical township, it would probably provide about 20 to 25% relief. If you live in a city with a higher tax, it'd probably be only 10 to 15% relief. But a lot of those taxes at the local level are voted on by the people. This is the first step that we can do legislatively, provide real relief. And then I think we got to tamp down the growth on annualized taxes. I mean, people are feeling squeezed. We got to put government on a diet. The amount of waste, fraud, and abuse that's happening at both the state level and I'd say the local levels around the state is criminal, and folks need to be held accountable for that. And that's why it's so important going into this fall's election is to make sure that people value your dollar as much as you do. And that's somebody like John James running for governor. That's folks at the federal level like Bill Huizenga running for re-election and Mike Rogers. And that's making sure like Nancy DeBoer, who's the chair of the Education Committee right now. They've passed some phonics-based education to bring back accountability to schools. She's taken the lead in the House, and unfortunately the state Senate hasn't acted on that. And that's going to be the importance of this fall's election, is that a lot of these reforms that have been introduced, that have been proposed, conservative reforms that will make a real difference for our students, for our families, for our seniors in Michigan, to make sure that they all can make it here in Michigan again, can actually get done. And that's the importance of this November's election. Now,
the other question I had dealing with the property tax thing, cuts that you are proposing, can budget trimming and budget reforms alone make up for the revenue that will not be coming in, and so the state's budget will be balanced? In other words, can there be enough cuts to be able to offset the revenue losses that would be coming if the property tax goes away.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you're talking $3 billion is what the state property tax brings in. That'll provide real relief to homeowners and small business owners around the state. And we've identified $5 billion of waste, fraud, and abuse in the budget. You just look at the last 8 years under Governor Whitmer, the growth and the size of the budget has increased by nearly 50% over the last 8 years. We could find a 4 or 5% cut in the current budget without much screaming. We got to provide real relief. People are feeling squeezed out there. This needs to be about the people. This can't be about how much government needs to take in. We got to make sure the government does a few things, make sure they do them well, whether it's education, law enforcement, fixing our roads, enough of this waste, fraud, and abuse, especially in social welfare programs. I mean, we just have started uncovering a lot of this we see in social welfare programs on waste, fraud, and abuse that are just, keeping able-bodied adults at home and out of the workforce. It's wrong, and it needs to end.
Now, you were talking about the auto insurance reforms. A couple of things along those lines. First of all, you were involved in the initial reforming of auto insurance when you first came to the Senate now 8 years ago. What has gone wrong about the reforms so that we got to revisit this issue once again?
Well, it was 1973, before I was born, is when we introduced auto no fault. And that's when the legislature passed it. It became law, and ever since then, Michigan's grown to be one of the most expensive auto insurance states in the nation. The reforms in 19 been helpful. They didn't go nearly as far as they should have because we were dealing with Governor Whitmer, and it had to be bipartisan reforms. We got it done. It did slow some of the growth. We went from the most expensive state in the nation to probably the third or fourth most expensive. That's not a huge win. Some progress, but believe me, families and seniors and business owners, they want to see real relief, and we can do that by starting to repeal auto no fault, and we can take on the trial lawyers to actually make sure we're in the bottom half of costs for insurance in the nation instead of one of the top five. And so the reforms that happened 7 years ago was just a start. Was more of a scalpel. We got to get in there with a hacksaw and make sure that we give real relief to the families and seniors here in Michigan.
The other point about that line is the fact that tort reform. You say the trial lawyers are getting the money. Some say part of it is because tort reform needs to be done because of really large awards, judicial awards, and it just doesn't seem like, we're paying for somebody else's mistakes, and everybody's paying for somebody else's mistakes that come across.
Well, excessive lawsuits cost Michigan families a hidden $3,000 per year. I call it a tort tax. And that's what you talk about is tort reform is that's what the cost here in Michigan compared to other states. And this is the reason why House Republicans and Senate Republicans have introduced legislation that'll reform tort reform here in the state of Michigan that'll lower insurance costs, protect small businesses, homeowners, farmers, and manufacturers from these abusive lawsuits. Michigan needs to restore what's called open and obvious. This is protections for families and job creators. This is why a lot of small business owners, especially in retail, have seen a huge increase in their insurance costs, which are, again, just passed along to hardworking families and seniors here in the state, or make our businesses less competitive for businesses around, in neighboring states. We need to ban foreign adversaries from funding litigation. Right now in Michigan, you can have foreign sovereign funds and other foreign investors investing in trial lawyers to bring lawsuits against American businesses, driving up the cost, making it less competitive. As I look at it, Michigan justice is for Michigan families, not for foreigners to profit from. And so those are the reforms that would help drive down the cost of not just auto insurance, but homeowners insurance, small business insurance so that folks can be able to make it here in Michigan again, lower the cost of doing business, lower the cost of living for hardworking families and small businesses and seniors, and so that people can live, grow, and prosper and raise their kids here in Michigan again.
Aric, one other thing I want to bring up, it was mentioned by one of the candidates for the Republican gubernatorial nomination. He was proposing eliminating Michigan's income tax. Is that something that is practical and feasible, or is just a good campaign line?
Oh, no, I think it's something Michigan needs to do if we're going to compete and win in the 21st century. Michigan didn't have a state income tax till the late 1960s. We operated before without one, and 10 other states don't have one. And you look at it, and you look at the growth of states that are both right-to-work states and have no state income tax, and you look at it, they're magnets for families, for businesses to grow and prosper, whether that's Tennessee, Florida, Texas, Nevada, South Dakota, New Hampshire. I mean, you go on down the list, and it's pretty impressive the states that are able to operate without a state income tax. Actually, Washington State, you look at the growth; they have no state income tax, and that's something where they're able to. A lot of these states are able to grow and invest because businesses and people are able to keep more of their hardworking money, and there's not that friction from being able to, some people call it a tax on productivity, other people call it a tax on work, and that's what the income tax is one that usually tax things, and it discourages those items from being purchased or produced. And unfortunately, in Michigan, that we have the 4.25% state income tax. Kind of funny that I think Justin Benz was being interviewed the other day, who's running for governor, the Democrat running for governor, and she couldn't even name the rate of the state income tax, and yet she wants to be governor of the state. And so I find it, and yet she wants to raise taxes for all working families and business owners here in the state of Michigan. And I think that's just the wrong way. This is the point in Michigan of where do we go as a state? Are we going to continue this gradual decline of being a bottom 10 state and just letting, that mediocrity continue to reign in Michigan? Or are we going to shake up the status quo, become active again, and make sure we get back in growing small businesses, attracting families, making sure folks here in the state of Michigan can succeed? And that's about making sure that our families and seniors and young people can make it in Michigan. And so if we're serious about that, we got to get it done.
Let's get to a call before we finish up our conversation with Aric Nesbitt. Good morning. You're on the line with the senator.
Yeah, I want you to run for governor. Governor, I'll vote for you if you want. Thank you.
Appreciate the call. Along those lines, Aric, would you consider another run if John James does not win the election in November? Would you consider maybe stepping in 4 years?
We're concentrated on helping win this fall. We're making sure that we bring back Republican majorities, and a state-wide race takes so much effort, resources, and time that's the furthest thing from my mind right now. It's again winning back the state Senate and the House, winning majorities there, and spending a little more time, especially in the weekends and evenings, with the family.
Okay. I've asked you this earlier this year. I'm going to revisit this question again.
Dangerous.
It's dangerous, yes, I understand. But I don't, I always tell people, go to our webpage, WHTC.com. We have our interviews archived in the podcast tab. You can listen or download it at your convenience. But I'm going to revisit this question again. It's going to be on the November ballot. It is the one that comes up every 16 years about whether or not Michigan should call a constitutional convention to maybe draw up a new constitution. Where is your stance on this particular issue there, Aric?
Yeah, I'm a yes on it. I think the status quo here in Michigan, the uniparty in Lansing between the Democrats and Republicans, they seem to be just fine with the operations. I'm somebody that's going to continue to stand up against the status quo, shake up the status quo in Lansing. And if we're going to do that, if we're actually going to be top 10 in education, top 10 in tax treatment and regulations, I think we got to look at a new way of doing things. The Constitution was written in the 1960s. Here in the state of Michigan, it's way too long. It's been bastardized over the last several decades with a lot of things that should probably be in statute instead of in the Constitution. Constitution should be very limited frameworks protecting individuals, setting up the framework of government. And I am going to be voting yes. It's Proposal 1 on the ballot. And what that would mean for those listeners that are interested, what that would mean is that then it'd just call a new constitutional convention. We'd elect delegates based on legislative districts in both the House and Senate that would serve at a constitutional convention that would be called. They would propose a new constitution, and then voters in the state of Michigan would have the opportunity of giving it a thumbs up or a thumbs down if it gets passed by those delegates at a state constitution. And so I think if we're serious about getting Michigan back, making sure that our kids are able to read, making sure that we lower the cost of government here in the state, we lower the levels of government to make it more efficient and effective, I'm going to be a yes vote on Proposal 1 this fall.
Now, along those lines there are those who might say, if we're having problems trying to get together with a budget, trying to get together with other things in Lansing already, calling it a state constitutional convention, in this polarized political atmosphere, it might be impossible to try to get agreement on a single document, let alone, all the things that a Constitution does.
Michigan's in such tough circumstances as a bottom 10 state in unemployment and income growth and education that we got to reform the bones of the state government. And we can do that while we protect individual rights. We can do that while we protect people around the state. But all I see are folks that are happy with the status quo in Lansing, whether, people call it the uniparty that are just protecting the status quo instead of shaking up the status quo that Michigan needs if we're going to succeed, compete, and win in the 21st century. That's why I'm in elected office. That's what I want to see with my kids and families. I want my kids, when they grow up, they decide to go to college or if they work, I want them to be in Michigan. I don't want them having to look elsewhere to seek those opportunities.
If you need to get a hold of State Senator Aric Nesbitt's office, you are in the 20th District. The phone number is 517-373-0793, 517-373-0793, or go online to senatoraricnesbitt.com. That's Aric with an A, senatoraricnesbitt.com. Aric Nesbitt, as always, thank you very much for your time. Wish you and your family well over the next month. And if all goes well, let's do this again in the month of September. Thank you, sir.
Sounds like a deal. God bless you.
Thank you very much. Aric Nesbitt on WHTC Holland's Cool FM.